And if you listen to their stories, you will never find the truth.
Find the truth.
And if you read what they are writing, you find your neck inside a noose.
Welcome to Extreme Brains, the podcast that embraces the chaos of a world gone wild. I'm David Evanoff, along with my fellow brainers and chaos enthusiasts, Sam Goldstein and James Woods. We are broadcasting to you from the semi-luxurious Evanoff Studios, located on the west side of the over-industrialized haven of South Salt Lake City, Utah. South Salt Lake City, Utah, the only place you can be south and west at the same time. Each week we'll dive headfirst into the absurdities of modern life, sharing sharp critiques, unfiltered humor, and just the right amount of existential dread. Our tagline, 3 voices, 1 mic, in a world gone wild. Welcome back, Brainers. It's episode 2. Thanks for being here. And let's take it back to Sam, where he's going to tell us about our brains.
Oh, brainers.
That's right.
Brainers. Do you know that's not a word?
You made it.
I made it up.
It's beautiful.
And then I've just sent it to all the dictionaries. So far, I have received no response.
Merriam-Webster has not written you back.
Merriam-Webster or the slang dictionary. But brainers, as in...
Slide into their DMs.
Right. Brainy would be smart, right? Brainiac. Brainless would be...
what that is.
Yeah, we know what that is. So brainer. So our definition of brainer is anyone who listens to the Extreme Brains podcast makes you a brainer.
See, you've invented your logo before. I think that's brilliant.
We have a new word. And how are you guys doing?
Good.
My brain feels good after last episode.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating thing, the brain, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. I don't think that there is another species anywhere in the universe, period, let alone with brains.
Wow.
Right. So, but one of the things we alluded to last time was, you need a brain because it both keeps track of the automatic things in your body, breathing, and I mean, think about it. When you go to sleep, you have no awareness of your existence, but your brain does. Keeps you breathing, keeps your heart going, it's pretty interesting. It's this kind of automatic, non-unionized system. Imagine if the back of your brain was in a union and said, you want to stay alive after you wake up?
Right.
Pay me.
Right.
You got to give me something. But so that's the one part of the brain. The other part of the brain is that we talked about this thinking part, maybe too much thinking, too much frontal lobes, too much thinking. But today we're going to talk about instincts, the automatic operations of the brain. Someone once said that instinct is the nose of the mind. I don't even know what that means.
I was just going to say.
But I don't know. But I found that quote. Instinct is the nose of the mind, meaning it like a secret. Don't they say that a detective has a good nose for? So the instincts kind of figure things out automatically, right?
Do you have a definition for us, the layman brainers out here? Is it as simple as just a hunch, or what is an instinct?
So let's start with what most people would consider an instinct. A bird building a nest. No one shows the bird. There's no video on YouTube for sparrows. Watch this to learn how to build a nest. So they know, right? Mm-hmm. This idea of a collective unconscious that Carl Jung talked about, that is embedded in our genes, is not just the template to build a person, but knowledge that helps that person operate. And that knowledge would be instincts. A bird building a nest. How does it know? How does it know how big to make the nest relative to how big the bird is? How does it know where to make the nest? A salmon swimming upstream, going back to where it was born to spawn. How does it know? As far as I'm aware, although we'd have to check and see if the Department of USAID or Health and Human Services has ever funded a salmon learning disability project. They go out and find the salmon who can't figure out how to get home and study them. Well, they've studied. The other day I heard that they were studying, what were they studying in rats or in guinea pigs? Some silly nonsense about problem solving or something. I don't remember what it was, but that's an instinct, right? So it's knowing without knowing. So it's knowing without a conscious awareness. Last time we talked about the mind. So this is the kind of the automaticity. So one would think that before we could think, we had instincts, or one would believe.
Where does that live in the brain?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Where does it live in your genes? How do the genes convey that information so that the bird knows, I go here. Look at the instincts of baby ducklings. It's to attach to whatever and whomever they see first. Right? They have that attachment right away. Why? Because those baby ducklings who did that survived. And those baby ducklings who said, hey, it's looking interesting over there, let me go see, got eaten by the alligator. Right? So instincts perhaps arose because they kept you alive. That's the bottom line, right? We talked about this last time. What would be intelligence 100,000 years ago? Acquiring the knowledge to stay alive. But somehow that knowledge is passed along from your experiences into your genes. How that happens is unclear. Remember, there was all that hoopla when we were younger about LSD.
Yeah.
That if you took LSD, somehow it affected your genes and your chromosomes, and I don't know if that's true or not true, but if you go through hundreds of thousands of generations, and I'm the salmon who was able to remember where I was born and go back there, how does that get passed along in the genes? How does acquired knowledge somehow make it into your genes? Because it's not all knowledge that makes it into your genes. Think about all the things you know. Wouldn't it be great if they'd gotten into your genes? All the musical knowledge you had just got into your genes, and
Be a lot easier.
Yeah, well, it'd be that movie, that Beatles. Remember that movie where the kid knew all the Beatles songs, but the Beatles had never existed?
Yep.
Right? So
Yesterday,
somehow all the Beatles songs got into his genes. Well, it was in his head, but yeah. And so if you move into higher species, you can think about simple instincts, sucking. So a baby sucks, right? What if a baby didn't suck? It would die.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So you'll hear sometimes a parent will say, oh, my baby had trouble nursing. They didn't latch on, and I eventually had to give them formula. Well, 10,000 years ago, those babies died. There was no Similac.
Right.
There were no bottles. If you didn't like the nipple, you were out of luck. You had a choice of two, this one or that one. and that was it. That was your only choice, right? So it's fixed patterns of behavior that arose because it enhanced your survival and somehow got transmitted and placed into your genes. See, it's hard to have this conversation without talking about God. I mean, not that this is not necessarily the topic of today. That'll be another topic, but it's hard to have that conversation because even the Darwinists can't explain, well, how does that experience get into the genes? Is it a mutation? What is it that gets into the genes that enhances your survival? So it's not learned behavior, but it once was learned behavior that somehow
materialized
in your genes.
in your genes.
Well,
right.
We lost some of that as we evolved. We're the squirrel that knows where to find the nuts and knows what to do and knows where to live. That perpetuates. But as we developed, we have less instincts.
Well, I think we have more complex instincts.
What's a
Right.
complex instinct?
So given your description of what's the word they say, phylogeny replicates ontogeny or something like that. I don't remember which one is which as we sit here, but simple species like salmon and snakes are born with the instincts to survive. Mm-hmm. They know where to go. They know what to eat. They don't need a mother. Bear cubs have that instinct, but they're cute in how they ineptly try and apply it. So they need a mother for 1 year. But after 1 year, mama kicks them out because she's got new babies, and you're on your own. If you didn't learn it this year, good luck.
On your own.
Right. So one parent. 2 parents for a bear is not a good idea because the daddy bear will kill the babies for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's an Oedipus thing. He sees them as somehow competition. I don't get it. And then you think about higher primates, which we've talked about. They have a mother and a father and a family group, right? But their sexual maturation is within a couple of years. So they only need a couple of years to be children. And technically, the age at which we reach puberty has gotten older. Used to be younger, for who knows why that is. And so before age, I see some children with precocious puberty, girls who at 8 or 9 are menstruating, but it's always accompanied by lots of emotional problems. Whether the hormones cause that or it's unclear. It's called precocious puberty. Doesn't happen in boys as much, but 10 or 11 is puberty for us. So there's a long period of time where our species can't take care of itself.
Yep.
And there isn't enough instinctual knowledge, even if it was passed in our genes, for a baby, a 2-year-old, to survive. How does a 2-year-old go about surviving? Even if it's in 100,000 years ago in the wilderness, they can't. They're going to be preyed on before they can prey on anything else. So this process of maturation takes a very long time. And because of that, I think our instincts have shifted away from basic survival to what I refer to as the 7 instincts that make us human. Innate ways of thinking and behaving that are not taught, are not observed, but when children are given the opportunity to exhibit them, they do. Fairness. Little children are generally fair. Responsibility. 2-year-olds want to help you cook and clean, and when they're 6 and you ask, they want to know what you're going to give them. That's an acquired taste. Altruism. Helping others. There's a great...
without wanting anything in return.
Yeah, without wanting anything in return. You know, there's a great research center in Germany, the Max Planck Institute. They study, among other things, instincts. And there's a great study of altruism, helping others. And they've got a 2-year-old sitting across the table, and they're playing with the child, and they drop their pencil, right? And the 2-year-old gets out of the chair, picks up the pencil, gives it back. Without no instruction, no direction. The researcher does it again. Baby gets up, gives it back. The kid will get up multiple times and give the pencil back and never once ask, "What's wrong with you? Can't you keep that pencil on the table?" No. Now, they've done that research with dogs because, again, we all evolved. We talked about that last time, that we evolved from rats. We're all scurrying around under the dinosaurs at one time. And with the dogs, it's funny because with the dogs, when you drop the pencil, it just looks. But if you throw the pencil, it goes to get it. Right? So the dog has a very different mentality. A different instinct, a different kind of altruism. And we've talked about last time what I call simultaneous intelligence, problem solving, critical thinking. We discussed last time what it would take to have an intelligence test for somebody living 100,000 years ago. And it would be, how do I survive? And then being intrinsically motivated and having empathy, caring about others, and being optimistic. Because how did our ancestors know the sun would come out the next day? How did they know if they just kept searching for something, they'd find something to eat? How did they know? I call that intuitive optimism. It's not taught. Or intrinsic motivation. It just comes from within.
Even in that first year of life, not picked up on just by existing around parents that are kind and...
If we add the contribution of the environment, absolutely. Because these complex genes, it's not one gene, it's not like eye or hair color, but these complex genes can't work without a push from the environment. You need an experiential push. So I'm arguing that kids will exhibit these behaviors just spontaneously.
Yeah.
But if you put them in an environment where these behaviors are modeled and they have opportunities to exhibit them, they're absolutely stronger.
Yeah.
Right?
Growth.
But they're not. Children are not these blank slates that we have to show them every single thing.
Wow.
They will exhibit optimism, motivation, empathy, problem solving, altruism, responsibility, fairness. They will exhibit that. Kids will argue it's not fair. It's not fair. Fairness is a big thing for our species. And I think partly because up until a few thousand years ago, in family groups, everybody did everything. And then at one point, we realized, hey, you could do something better than everybody else, so you do it and we'll pay you.
That's your job, yeah.
That's your job. And look at the extreme athletes who are innately capable, or musicians who are just innately capable, are reinforced because they can do something most people can't.
What happens when these children grow as adults and the pencil falls off the table and they just look at it and say, like, get your own pencil?
So
what changes?
I think that's experience.
That's all. That's all. Nurture,
I think that's
right?
nurture. I think that's all nurture. As I pointed out, 2-year-olds never ask what's in it for me when you ask them to help. And older kids have learned there's a quid pro quo. Some of it because that's how we promote it. But you always get further with a kid saying, I need your help, than I need you to do this.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Which I think speaks to that, that whole issue. And fairness is an issue. But my point being here that the conscious brain thinks and problem solves and takes experiences and assimilates it, takes it in and accommodates it with what they already know. The mind, you can change your mind with new information. But I think without instincts, whether it's just a startle, whether it's more complex, those are the kind of the basic instincts that people think of, like a startle reflex or a sucking reflex. But here, I'm arguing that we have these instincts that are baked in because they enhanced our survival. That for thousands of generations, if you were optimistic and motivated, empathic, and learned, how to problem solve by experience and helped others and were responsible and made an effort to be fair, it increased your chances of survival.
And growing within the community. You weren't the asshole. You were the kind guy that helped.
Right.
And you promoted yourself in the community.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
And I think bear cubs is a good example of the nature nurture because they have some instinct, or lions hunting. They clearly have an instinct for how to do it, but they need the older lionesses to show them, hey, you just can't run right at these zebras. You got to have a plan.
Right.
You got to have some idea of what you're trying to do. And I think look at some animals will exhibit certain kinds of problem-solving behavior, critical thinking, like the crow who figures out how to get a stick and use it to pull something over,
Tools,
having never seen that, had never had that experience, right? So, I mean, the dilemma for us in society today is that sometimes the thinking gets the better of your instincts. And your instincts say, be responsible, be altruistic, be empathic, be supportive. But experience tells you don't do that because then someone will take advantage of you or don't help. I mean, it's an interesting question on one of the intelligence tests. I ask young children, one of the questions is, why should you not talk to strangers? And universally, the answer is because they'll take you, they'll kidnap you, they're bad for you. And isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Right? And there's society's kind of influence. But I think the takeaway message is that we think we're smarter than all the other species, maybe. But if intelligence is defined as how adapted you are to your environment, sharks and alligators have been around longer and are better adapted. But it helps us understand this explanation at any given moment for why we do what we do. Some of it is instinctual. And the argument that I'm making is that if we get in closer touch with those instincts, we can fix this world that's become so screwed up. And after the break, we could talk about the unholy trinity of instincts that I think helped our survival, but got us where we are today.
Well, speaking of break, let's take a little one right now. We'll listen to some music by the band Sigmund Freud, and we'll be right back.
I remember waiting for the time to pass, sitting in my homeroom class. I failed everything but girls and rock and roll. The clock turned slow and sacrifice, man. I did it once, I do it twice. So I grew my hair and let music save my soul. Time goes by, it goes so fast. Memory of when I said I see you out in Hollywood. Everything is still the same, but life is on its own time frame. And I tell you I wouldn't change it if I could. The light's not out on Hollywood.
Welcome back. Thanks for listening. It's great to have you brainers back with us. We were just about to hear, if the timing is right, about the unholy trinity of instincts.
Of instincts, right? So it's not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
That would be the holy.
Although, as a quick aside,
Yeah.
I have a little quiz for you guys. So I show you a torn picture of a family, and on one side is a man, and in the middle is a child. And he's got his arm draped over the child. And you could see another arm, but the adult on the other side has been torn away. Right? So what would you, if I said, who do you think was in that other side of that picture?
The mother.
Yeah, the other parent.
Right. Except that doesn't work in the Catholic religion, in most Christian religions. So it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And Mary, for years, got screwed out of any recognition. And another time, we can be fairly controversial and talk about how in any society that's had the written word, women get screwed, and how religion has used the written word to supplement women and put them in their place. And in the few societies that were not based on written word, women were equals. They were landholders. They were equal in society. And it's an interesting trend. We think we're also smart. We're the product of all those past societies, maybe. But it's interesting that in our society, as the written word is going out the window, people don't write anymore. They text. They don't really write. Women are now gaining more of a voice, equal footing, right? And so I mean, one of these shows will argue, is religion really what would be the right way of praising it? Is religion
modern society?
Is religion an obstacle to using your brain effectively? And I'm not anti-religion because I think belief is a very valuable resource for our species, and that's one of the three. So it's a good entree into the three. So here,
Do you have to navigate that when you're working with patients and their families? The religion is part of the family, is not part of the family. So does that become part of your diagnostic path?
So I stay away from the religion
Those
issues.
dynamics.
Yeah, it's not relevant one way or the other. Sometimes we'll just, it might come up, but I don't really deal with it one way or the other. I have more trouble when parents have a rigid idea of what kids should do. The religion doesn't bug me as much as the parent who says, well, he's not doing his chores. And my response, my thought, I don't say it, my thought is, wait a minute. You bought this 5,000 square foot house. You mortgaged yourself to the hilt so you don't have extra money to have somebody come in and clean. And now you're going to use your 4 kids as your cleaning service. They didn't pick that house.
Doing his chores.
Maybe they cleaned their room, but they didn't, well, I have to be really careful because that's not going to get me very far, right? And I think back to my mother. Now, I grew up in New York City in a 3-bedroom apartment, so it was a little different. But my mother would say, your job is school, and don't get in trouble. And you don't have to cook.
We've all heard that, right?
You don't have to cook.
Yeah.
You don't have to clean. You don't have to just do that's your job. I do think when parents ask for help, hey, we have a big house, I need your help. That's very different than assigning, you do clean this bathroom. Because I've had kids come in and say, I didn't go in that bathroom all week. Why should I have to clean it? I didn't use that bathroom. Why is it? Anyway. Mm-hmm. So I don't have as much trouble with belief. And I never really challenge family values. I try and help parents understand what might be going on, to see the world through the eyes of their kid. And I try and do a day in the life of your child. So what have we learned from this evaluation from morning till night? How does your child think? How do they feel? What have they learned? What understanding do we have for some of their behavior? Wow. And then, do we want to do something? Is there something we want to do about it? I'm not a big pathologizer or a demonizer or a moralizer. I just want to help the parents kind of see the world through the eyes of their kid. And most parents, when you give them a logical explanation, sometime we maybe talk about interesting cases, for why their child does or doesn't do what they're doing, and they go, oh, that makes sense. And without me telling them what to do, they just, quote, intuition-wise, they intuitively change what they do because now they understand what the source of the problem is.
It probably
Right?
depends on family dynamics as well, right? Because
Yeah,
what if you have a family unit, everybody should be contributing to the family unit in some way.
In some way.
In some way.
Right. But the example that comes to mind without thinking very deeply about this is the anxious child who's just overwhelmed with anxiety. They're born with a nervous system that's set as if they're in the middle of the night in a bad neighborhood in a dark alley. So every little thing is anxiety provoking, and the parent says to the child, well, tell the waiter what you want from the menu. And the child is, well, speak up. What's the matter with you? Why don't you speak up? You need to go to the bathroom. Ask the waiter where the bathroom is. And the kid is just overwhelmed as if it's going to be the end of the world if they ask. But anxiety is not rational. But when I explain that to a parent, and then a parent goes, I was like that, then suddenly I don't have to tell them what to do different.
Right.
I can say, the parent will say, so next time we go in a restaurant, before we go in, I'm going to ask her, are you comfortable ordering today? And if the child says no, I'll say, fine. And if they say yes, I'll say, okay, let's try it. But great. Understanding that we can talk about, one show we'll talk about temperament, the qualities that children bring to the world before we have a chance to screw them up. Maybe that would be a good, because we could talk about our own kids and how different temperaments our kids are. Sure. Right? Just yesterday I'm evaluating two boys that were, the parent came from Georgia for me to see. One boy had a head injury, and the other one came along because the mother was concerned about him. And the one boy is, the one who didn't have the head injury, is just anxious and bright but slow. Every question requires him to think. What should have taken me an hour to do took 2.5 hours in this testing. Right? So his temperament begins to disrupt his ability to effectively interact with his world, and that's what the teachers say. The other boy who had a head injury is just hell on wheels, and he could care less, and he just wants to get it over with, but you have to understand that before you intervene. It's always surprising to me how many people who do mental health therapy or counseling typically social workers. I don't want to give social workers a bad name. How they put people in counseling without doing any kind of evaluation. It was like you going to the emergency room saying, I hurt my arm, and the physician saying, good, we'll put it in a cast. And you say, well, do I need a cast? Well, I don't know, but let's try it. You'd go, well, wait, this is bad medicine. And I see a lot of kids who are, quote, counseling dropouts because the counselor doesn't understand the intellectual functioning, the temperament, the emotional regulation, and is trying to get the child to do things that out in the real world they just aren't not going to be capable of doing, right? Which is why I'm such a big fan of you got to do an evaluation first. You have to see the world through the eyes of the kid first to have some understanding.
Do you find that sometimes it's the kid's behavior is because of the parents' behavior?
Well,
or in the environment that the parents are providing?
So let's look at a couple of possible scenarios. So mom has OCD, and it just spends a lot of time fixing and checking and right. And there's 3 kids, and one kid joins right in, and the other 2 go, Mom's crazy. I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
So there are extremes. It takes 2 to tango. The child has to have the genetic vulnerability.
Okay.
Right? So look at our reaction to extreme stress. You don't know how you're going to react to some real stressful event until it happens. You don't know how resilient you're going to be until it happens. So now we're trying to stress inoculate kids and provide them with strategies to be more resilient should an adversity come their way, because you can't build walls high enough or locks strong enough to keep the world out, so you have to teach the kid how to deal with the world, right? On the other hand, every lemming will go over the edge if there's enough push from behind. So you could take a seemingly normal child and put them in a chaotic, disrupted early environment where their needs aren't met, and it does cause a lot of problems that then seem to not, even when you put the child in a safer environment, it's not, the kid can't seem to turn it off. Mm-hmm. I mean, and the explanation I use is post-traumatic stress. So why did we evolve that kind of stressful reaction where you have flashbacks and you remember and you're disrupted? Because 50,000 years ago, you needed to remember that event, because if it happens again, you had to be ready because it could kill you. But today, most PTSD, not chronic where kids are abused over long periods of time, but if, say, an automobile accident is a single episode event. And some people just get on with their lives after, and some people get stuck. And I think it has something to do with your biology. You have too much of a good thing. Whatever those genes are that keep that risk in mind, and you just can't forget about it. And you see some people who don't move on. And we saw that after wars. There's a lot of people who were exposed to very stressful circumstances, and they come home and they eventually figure out how to cope and adjust, and others don't. And I don't think it's because they're lesser people. I think their nervous systems just work differently in terms of constantly reminding you about the event. And the middle of the brain gets information about the world a few milliseconds before the front of the brain. And the front of the brain evolved later. The front of the brain is Mr. Spock, the Vulcan, who's calm and organized and rational. And the middle of the brain is the Klingon, it's Mr. Worf. And so we all deal with the world in an emotional way. I use the term brain dancing, which I borrowed from a researcher many, many years ago, since passed away, that we could all brain dance at any given moment. If you're out with your daughter and someone is a little aggressive towards her, you're going to behave in a way that is not the kind, gentle, democratic Dave that I know. You're going to turn into a right-wing, gun-toting Republican.
I have been there.
Right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
Right. And
my wife said, I've never loved you more.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was turned on.
Right. See? So it's a complicated thing. So there's not a single answer.
What about children that maybe had a traumatic event as a child, say 2 years old, that they don't really remember as they get older, but now they're super anxious all the time?
Well, I don't know if there's an unconscious memory to that. I
Can
think
that change your anxious?
I think during critical periods of brain development, disruption, like in the first 2 years, can change how the brain organizes itself
And responses
and
to
responds
stress.
to stress forever on. But it's still not the case. You look at kids who have supposed reactive attachment disorder, right, where they've been abused or neglected early on, and then you try and adopt them out, and they don't attach to anybody. I had a kid I worked with. He was great. He would always carry this backpack of books around. He'd been adopted, but he was a very difficult kid. And I said, why do you carry all those around with you all the time? He said, well, I never know when I'm going to have to leave. He just was always was always ready to go.
Wow.
Right? He was always ready to move on. And his was an interesting story because he was an older sibling and a younger sibling, and the two parents were schizophrenic. And so there was a folie à deux between the two parents, and they were driving all over the country. This is 30 years ago, and staying in motels and doing all kinds of stuff. And one day their folie à deux convinced them that the kids were possessed by the devil. So they left the kids in the hotel and left.
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, the kids end up in care, and the kids had such dysfunctional relationships with each other, they had to adopt them out separately. And this,
terrible.
but this boy, I think, was a failure. One, because people who adopted him thought he's going to come and be perfect, and he wasn't, and he continued to have a lot of problems. But look at the biology of the parents. So,
Right.
How much is genetics, and how much is experience shaping genetics?
Even if there are events they don't necessarily remember.
Even if there are events they don't remember, but this forgotten memory phenomenon that became very popular, and there were lawsuits of people suing about, you abused me when I was a kid, and there's not a lot of science to how it works, or I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there isn't a lot of information to tell us, well, how exactly does that work? And what I was going to say is, you have to be able to deal with the exceptions to the rule. So I see a lot of children who come from abusive, neglected early environments who are adopted and within a short period of time fit in and do really well. And those kids, there's so much variability because mother is consuming tobacco during the pregnancy, consuming other illicit substances that affects, alcohol, which is the only thing worse if you're pregnant than alcohol is put your head in a gas oven as a mother. I mean, alcohol causes all of these problems, and at the extreme it causes, microcephalic head, a very thin head, and a cleft lip. But at lesser extents, we talked about this last time, how the brain forms. It just disrupts the structure of the brain. That's in utero, right? So I don't think we know. I think what's fair to say is it's not a good thing to do bad things to young children.
That's fair.
Right?
Simply put,
it's not going to be good for them in the short run or in the long run. But before we run out of time in this segment, so belief is that one of what I call the unholy trinity. So I'll ask you to consider, tell me 5 things in the news, difficult or tragic or concerning things in the news in the last week. Pick any 5.
Boy.
I mean, anything. I'll start. The stuff going on in Gaza.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had the traffic thing in New Orleans where the guy rolled down the street and ran over people, and yeah.
Okay. And the thing in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, maybe not in the last week, but the natural disasters.
LA fires.
Okay.
LA fires.
Or the now
North
it's
Carolina.
raining there. Now it's
right.
It's
Yeah,
flooding.
it's causing
Or I'll
flooding
even
and
pick
landslides.
the Kansas City losing the Super Bowl.
Okay. To some people,
Any
sure.
adverse event, right? Yeah. Okay. So my theory is that there are 3 instincts that helped us survive for hundreds of thousands of years. Our species is only a few 100,000 years old. And they worked really well. But today, they're working against us. And we're going to have to learn how to not let them be so automatic. Right? So the first one is belief. Belief's a valuable ally if you don't have actionable knowledge or fact. You had to believe 50,000 years ago the sun would go down, it will come back. You had to believe it may get cold, but eventually it'll get warm. You had to believe. Belief became a way of survival, because if you couldn't believe, then how could you function 50,000 years ago? You had to believe, even if it wasn't that conscious, you still had to believe, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So now look at how belief, take those 5 events. how that's affected people's opinions about Patrick Mahomes, how that's affected people's opinions about what governments do to save a little fish at the expense of the population. Belief. I believe, right. So belief today is used to hammer your opinions over other people. I believe mine is the right religion, yours is not. I believe mine is the right politic, yours is not.
Yeah, I believe I'm right and you're wrong.
Right. And even in the face of facts, because we're looking at all of these things USAID has funded, even in the face of facts, there are people who get up and say, oh, they're doing great work. Maybe, but I don't show me the great work they're doing. I just want to see one great thing they're doing. Okay, so belief. Second one is fear of difference. Because 50,000 years ago, if you ventured across the valley to a different hominid species, meaning another human-like species, but not Homo sapiens, not us, to say hello, you brought some cookies, they would eat you. You were a source of food, right? So it pays to be fearful of anything different. I mean, the idea that we, through our parenting and how we raise children, teach them to be afraid of people of different color or different politic. Yeah, there is some truth to it, but you have to ask why it arose in the first place. Why did we even think about it in the first place? And I will argue it's baked into our genes. Anything a little different makes us a little uncomfortable.
That's interesting.
From people who are handicapped that we kind of shy away from being around, to people of different color skin, and we try and pretend, oh no, that's not true. That isn't. But that's wrong. We all and we have to own it. We have to say, yeah, sometimes when someone who looks a certain way comes in the room, it makes me a little nervous. We just have to own it and then say, use the front of our brains, the Vulcan part of our brains to say, yeah, but that's my instincts run wild. Remember that show, Girls Gone Wild? I want to have instincts gone wild, right? And it's my instincts gone wild. So that's the second one, fear of difference. We're afraid of anything that doesn't suit our narrow lane of where we are. And the third one, so belief, fear of difference. The last one's my favorite. An aggressive response to real or perceived threat. Because 50,000 years ago, if you had food and wouldn't share it, I would hit you over the head with a stick
and
take your food.
Sure.
So we wonder why we're aggressive. Was it Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, who said she found some tribes in New Guinea or somewhere who were not aggressive. They were all very kind and nice. And then it turned out that they were just playing a joke on her, that they actually would eat the other tribe. They were just fooling her. That it's not, that's not true. That built into our genes is fight first, talk later.
Wow. It's very interesting.
Fight first, talk later.
Makes
right?
sense.
And so those three kept us alive. Think about those news stories we just covered. Not the physical part of it, as in the fires but how we think about it, how we deal with it, how we respond to it. It's always a belief, a fear that what you're proposing isn't right, and an aggressive response because you're eventually going to get around to hitting me. I may as well hit you first. And that's instinctual. I don't think that's a conscious thing. I think
you don't think it's a learned behavior.
I think learning plays a role, but the question I'm asking is why did it start? Where did it start in the first place? Whose idea was it to say, if your skin is a different color than mine, I'm afraid of you?
I'm afraid of you. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a terrible idea.
Right, but right. Or if your skin is a different color than mine, you're not as smart as me. Now that could be a cultural thing. You could be taught that.
Right.
But the fear of it, I think it starts with, I'm a little afraid of you.
It's baked in.
Yeah, maybe. I could be wrong, but I think it's baked in. I think it's just baked in.
Well, let's take a little break. When we come back, we've got more from the band Sigmund Freud, and then Sam's going to make our instincts a little sharper. Maybe he's not, I don't know. I'm ad-libbing. Be right back.
Ellie is 9, with eyes that shine, a curious mind in a world so fine. Music and colors swirl around, in her heart where joy is found. She's a star in the sky, dancing so high, in a world of her own where melodies fly. With art and a tune, she'll light up the room. Ellie's song is the beat of her soul's true blue.
And welcome back. Thanks for listening to the band Sigmund Freud. Check us out on YouTube and soon on other formats. We'll be everywhere. We'll be in your house. We'll be in your car, I hope. All right.
We'll be in your ear. We
I
will.
hope so.
We will. Hey, imagine you are sitting around with a bunch of angels and trying to think about how to make man, right? That would be a good 6-part fictionalized reality series, because we love fiction, and half of what we know is not right, but we think it's right because we saw it on television or in a movie or whatever. But imagine it's the beginning of time, and God says, okay, we've practiced enough, we've had enough failures, I got it. We're going to make man. We're ready to go. We're going to make man.
I have the formula.
And I have the formula, and we're going to make the heaven and the earth first. We'll start with all that, and then we're going to make man. Actually, we're going to make woman first, and we're going to make her smarter and more resilient, and but because she eats the apple, she's going to suffer.
We're going to demote her.
We demote her.
Yeah.
But we start out, she's the one.
Yeah.
She's the one. And we say, okay, so how is this being going to connect with the world around it? And one of the angels pipes up, we'll make it here. Here. They'll hear. Oh, that's great. There'll be sounds and they'll hear. Is that going to be enough? No. We'll make it see. Oh, you'll see and hear. Oh, that's all we need. Who needs anything else? And one of the angels pipes up and says, well, but what if a big rock crushes one of its legs and it doesn't feel anything? That's not going to be good. Okay. We'll give it feeling on its tactile, on its skin. We'll give it feeling, and it'll be able to tell hot and cold. And they go through this and they come up with these 5 senses, right? And then one of the angels says, Jesus, how is anybody...
Yeah.
Jesus.
Literally and metaphorically.
Jesus, we don't need you yet. It'll be a few million years.
We'll call you
Just
in a
wait,
while.
we'll call you when it's your turn.
Yeah.
But how... These people are going to be bombarded with sensory information, sounds and seeing and touching and tasting and smelling and hearing. They're just going to be overloaded. How are they ever going to kind of function? And then another angel pipes up and says, we'll help the brain screen it out. We'll help the brain. We'll make the brain able to process it all in an automatic, instinctual way, but only pay attention to one thing at a time. So the brain doesn't really multitask. We think of one thing at a time. We've talked about this. Mm-hmm. And we keep millions of other things. If someone knocks on the door, anything, you shift your focus, you shift your attention, and you pay attention to something else. We don't pay attention to 2 things at the same time. We shift between them, right? And so now the brain, God says, okay, I'm going to give you this great sensory system. And now the brain has to develop this ability to process and track it. And some of us just can't gate it. And we just are overwhelmed by the sounds and it's an interesting phenomena. If you talk about evolution, then you say, well, it makes sense that we evolved to see, to hear, to taste, to smell, to touch, right? So what is the 6th sense? And some people say, well, that's your instincts, right? That's these kind of automatic behaviors that arise when you don't even think that you know what to do, you know what to do. Right? And people use the example of our fear of spiders and snakes. It's instinctual. We're all afraid of spiders and snakes.
Or what I hear now all the time, a mother's intuition. I don't know, but I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know what I know. So now we have a brain and these instincts and a sensory system that gives us information about the world, because the brain couldn't function if it was just locked in a room with we were watching this. We started watching this series. It's in its second season, of these people who go through this Severance. Have you seen Severance?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Did you see it?
Mm-hmm.
It's this, and Ben Stiller directs it, and he's been watching too much Alfred Hitchcock while he's been high, because he thinks he's doing Alfred Hitchcock, but really some of his camera angles and stuff, and you go, Jesus Christ, what are you doing here? But anyway, that's this idea of you have a brain, but it's cut off from the world. Mm-hmm. So we need the sensory system, right? And because there's so much sensation coming in and the world is such a dangerous place, then we evolved these instincts, simple instincts like a startle or a reflex, and now with the front of our brain, these more complex instincts that help us stay alive. So the real question is, how are we going to move forward? If we have a tendency to rely on these instincts, but we're too smart for our own goodness and we pretend they don't exist, then how are we going to move forward?
How do we perpetuate that? You kick this off with the notion of help me, as opposed to a command.
Do this.
Do
Right.
this.
Right.
How do we perpetuate that over a lifetime or over generations? Those things.
But that
changed.
change of mindset, that instincts are these ancient tools that evolved because they kept us alive, but I think not just potential, but clearly hindrances to our staying alive. And I don't know that I have an answer of what to do other than what Bob Brooks and I posed in our book Tenacity, was that these 7 affirmative instincts, maybe we should go over them again,
please.
But these 7 affirmative instincts ought to be used to combat the other 3. That we have to acknowledge that the other 3 exist. Belief, and there's nothing wrong with belief in general, but when it's used as a weapon against others,
When it's combative.
yeah.
Yeah.
And our fear of difference and our aggressive response, if we don't embrace that and say, look, this is who we are, we're not this perfect species. Because what do they say? God made man in his image? Is that what they say? Mm-hmm. Is that what it says? I don't remember.
people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty imperfect God. I'm not trusting my life to that guy.
Yeah.
If he thinks like I think. But I if we don't use these more powerful instincts, I mean, you find it interesting even in current politics why someone can say, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I feel, and other people say, no, you're kidding us. You're not telling us the truth, right? How do we know? What's the ultimate measure of truth? And again, we're a species that is willing to lie and cheat in order to survive. I believe I deserve that.
And so that comes from your unholy side.
I think that comes from the unholy side, and I think when you look at religion, when you look at the evolution of religion, it began as a way of trying to strengthen belief that the crops would grow, or that a woman would be fertile, or that whatever. If you go back in early religions, I mean, the problem is we really don't have a collective unconscious. As you and I sit here, we can't remember when we lived in the city of Ur 10,000 years ago, and if you go back and you read books like what's his it's not Masada, is it called The Tell? I don't remember, but it takes place on a piece of land in the Holy Land, and it starts 15,000 years ago, and every chapter moves forward in time, and you get to see, Irving Wallace, I think, wrote it, and you get to see what society or culture is like. I think it's Irving Wallace. We'll check. And the strange beliefs that we had, right? But that's really the start of religion. So if it just stuck with belief, that would be fine. But if you really read the Bible, which is a pretty violent, aggressive book, that belief is pushed into fear of difference. You're different, so I have to kill you. And an aggressive way of dealing with you, rather than saying, let's figure out how to live together. I say, either you become my slave or I'm going to kill you. And we don't really have a way of resolving that. So I tend to be a little pessimistic about
About the future. Well,
about
isn't
the
there some
future.
school of thought that Neanderthals in part were passive as a culture and so were beaten by the modern
Yeah.
man?
Well, and it's funny because they use that term in a negative way.
Right.
When in fact the Neanderthals survived in a very difficult climate for at least 100,000 years. And maybe they weren't as aggressive as we were when we migrated out of Africa. Maybe we intermarried. It's possible that we all intermarried. And the last Neanderthal was only a few thousand years ago.
Right.
Wasn't that long ago, but at least, 1 million to a half a million years ago, there were a lot of human-like species that evolved and for whatever reasons disappeared. But I think the front of our brains is the source of these more advanced instincts as I look at them, right? Someone else may say, no, those aren't instincts. Those are ways of thinking or ways of feeling or ways of behaving. But I think it's intuitive optimism. It's being optimistic. It's going to be okay, right? It's intrinsic motivation. It's motivation that comes from within, not because there's some consequence offered. It's compassionate empathy. It's not just, seeing the world through your eyes, but it's appreciating it in a compassionate way. It's easy to be empathic when someone agrees with you, right? It's much harder. And being altruistic, giving of yourself to help others, being responsible, taking responsibility for your behavior. We don't do that, and nobody takes responsibility anymore. Somebody else's fault. I didn't do it.
Sure.
Somebody else's fault. And fairness, this whole idea of being fair. I mean, fairness is such a big deal in our species, right? Kids complain, it's not fair, it's not fair. My 3 dogs, if I line them up and I give 2 of them a favorite treat, and one gets an okay treat, but not the favorite treat. The other 2 grab their treats and run away. And the third one, doesn't matter which one it is, Daisy, Dolly, or Sugar, just looks at it. And then looks at me and looks at it like, this isn't fair. What are you doing? Right? So fairness is an issue. We're concerned about that. I think those 7 really define how we deal with the world in almost an automatic way. But again, I think it's a complicated dance between experience and genetics and temperament, right? If your temperament is to be anxious, it makes it harder.
We've got those 7, and then we've got your unholy 3
Right.
causing some friction.
I think fear of difference, aggressive response, and excessive belief are responsible for everything that's wrong in the world today. I challenge you, tell me something that's wrong in the world today that one or more of those doesn't play a role in.
Absolutely.
I mean, you you shouldn't agree with me so easily. You should say, well, all right, let's think about it.
Well, it just happens to be a subject I've thought a lot about and read a lot about, and I agree with you.
I'm fairly pessimistic about how the world's going to go.
How do we
where
get
we're
to?
headed.
You mentioned Worf and how do we get to the federation where we all live on the 7? It's all about the betterment of each individual person.
Well, Roddenberry was great in demonstrating, especially the original Star Treks, in demonstrating these important issues. But just like we never saw a bathroom on the Enterprise, he never told us how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
There was never any explanation.
The premise was that we had.
We'd
gotten there. We don't know
right,
how.
But how did we get there?
Yeah.
So you see that movie. What's the movie where they have the purge one night and they go out and kill all the bad people? And so what are we going to do? Are we going to, there are some who argue we should outlaw religion. Well, how are you going to do that? Or we should,
The Romans tried it.
How are we going to?
Yeah, it didn't work out good for them.
So how are we going to do it? How do we get from a world where people do the right thing just because it's the right thing? How do we get there? And I worry that our society is so convoluted and so complex.
There's so much outside influence now, too.
Yeah, I mean, I empathize with parents trying to raise young kids. I mean, our kids are older. Ours are all older. But yours is just a little thing.
Just starting. Yeah.
Right. So what do you think? And what do you worry about?
Yeah. I mean, everything. Because last night at a restaurant, my little 2-year-old walked around the restaurant and said hello to everybody. And she was engaging and lovely. And she told them all goodbye. And she put a smile on everybody's face at that restaurant last night. And my fear is, what is it going to be that ruins that for her?
Right. Fast forward.
Yeah. What
10
is
or 20
the thing
years.
going to be that disappoints her? So she doesn't. I'm not going to
Doesn't want to
I
talk
don't
to
want to
those
talk to those people.
But some of it is parents telling the child, "Don't talk to strangers."
Yeah. Right. I know, and that's coming too, right?
Right. Which is again why we would be better off if we had the brains and instincts of a dog.
Of a dog. And here we come.
We might eat our excrement every once in a while, but most of the time we'd be okay if we just had those instincts. Dogs love everybody till you do them wrong.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, your dog will not like a certain person, and you're like, why? In a past
What's the
life,
vibe?
did this person abuse this dog? But most of the time, they like everybody.
They say that's a good predictor of
the people.
that you're hanging out with. Why don't they like Sam? Why doesn't my dog like Sam? I don't get it.
That's right. So it's a complicated thing. And what bugs me a lot is that we deal with a lot of these things in very superficial ways. Oh, you're depressed? Let's find a way for you to process the world better, or let's find a way for you to be happy. You're anxious. Let's work on not being afraid of things. But we never stop and step back and say, well, why? Why does 1 in 5 people worry to the point where it causes them some trouble? Why do some people feel helpless or hopeless even if they've never faced significant challenge or adversity? Why do some people have so much difficulty taking other people's perspective or communicating socially? Why do some people see things that aren't there? This morning I interviewed a 23-year-old that I'm trying to help through vocational rehabilitation figure out what she can do, and she's schizophrenic. And even though she's being treated with medications, when I ask her, she says, oh yeah, I hear those voices all the time. But the difference now with the medication is they don't seem to impact her at all. She couldn't tell me what they say. She couldn't, whereas before she was carrying on conversations with them all day long. But why? And is that some glitch in the brain that causes that in some people? Is it might we, like in Woody Allen's Sleeper, where he wakes up years later and they give him a cigarette and a scotch and they say, we figured out this is good for you?
Right.
Might we someday think at Extreme Brains? That's why we call it the podcast Extreme Brains. Maybe we'll figure out that some of these extreme brains have something to teach us, or we can learn from them as opposed to pathologizing and demonizing them, because we've decided that that mental health is about the absence of mental illness. And I'll leave you with this, because at any given moment, about 1 out of 4 people has a mental health disorder as we define it, mostly depression and anxiety. And even if you wait, it's still not more than 25%. Some people cycle out of depression, others cycle in. But at any given time, it's probably 1 out of 5. Okay. So I'll ask you, do you think that means the other 80% are having a wonderful life?
I would say no.
No.
And the answer is no.
No.
Yeah.
Right? So researchers have looked at those people who say, I am having a wonderful life. And it's about 20%. So between the 20 who have a defined mental health diagnosis and the 20 who say, I'm flourishing, is 60% of the population. And sometimes we say they have shadow syndromes. They have some symptoms of depression, but not enough to seriously disrupt their life, but enough that it bothers them, it impinges on them, right? So now we look at that 20% and we say, why can't we all be like this 20%? What is it genes? You're just lucky? Is it, because mental health, we joke, is inherited. You get it from your children, right? Raising your children, but really it's the other way around. But what is it about that 20%? And in research, and I use this in treatment, when you ask that 20% to think about their lives and provide numbers, 1 to 10, how grateful were you today? How thankful were you? How happy were you? How connected did you feel to other people versus negative? How angry? How frustrated? How isolated? That people who are flourishing tend to have 2 to 3 times as many positive thoughts as negative thoughts in the course of a day. And people who are struggling, it's way the other way. And in fact, one of the strategies I use with older adolescents and adults is I have them keep a log. We identify 5 positive and 5 negative thoughts, and I have them keep a log at the end of the day and rate on a 1 to 10, how thankful were you today? And usually
That's great.
Usually it's negative. It's a lot more the negative than the positive. We make a ratio, add up the numbers. But then I forcefully make them change it. So 3 times, 4 times a day, you have to stop and think of 3 things you're grateful for in your life. And then at the end of the day, when you think back, was I grateful today? You go, oh, yeah, I was. I thought about, right. And the numbers change. And
Smart.
your attitude changes, which is why I think people think. We didn't get to that today, but there are some who believe that people don't think. It's just our instinctual stimulus response to the world. The Pavlovian, the bell rings and you salivate, right? But here's a change where if you change what you're thinking, you change how you're feeling, and you change what you're doing. I mean, these are the 3, I'll leave you with this, these are the 3 basic ways. The California School of Psychotherapy is how you feeling, man? What's going on? How's it going? And the thought is, if we talk about your feelings, you'll think different and you'll behave different. And the East Coast, where I come from, model is to not ask how you're feeling, to ask what you're thinking. What have you been thinking, huh? What's in your head? Because the way you think will shape how you feel and what you do. And then there's the middle of the country who they have no idea what they're doing. But I'm on the East Coast because I believe that the way you think will affect how you feel and will affect what you do.
And you can change that.
And you can change that.
It sounds like you've got brain exercises.
Right. And you can, that's right. And you can absolutely change that. And it changes how you are. Whereas the research on talking about feelings doesn't tend to change what you're thinking or your behavior. Or talking about behavior, just go out and do this and I'll give you a reward, doesn't seem to really change. But changing your mind, which is why I'm a cognitive therapist, changing your mind, I think, changes your feelings. And I think what came first was your physiological response. We talked about that. The nervous system's response. The body has one emotion, arousal. I can't tell if you're happy, sad, angry, frustrated by your heart rate or by your breathing. It's always elevated. And the front of the brain labels it. It doesn't label it in a feeling way. It labels it in a cognitive way. You know, We say, I feel happy, but really it's a process of, I am happy because.
Bravo.
And it does work. That's called flourishing, that idea of flourishing. So if you're not flourishing, there's hope for you. Think about 5 positive things: happiness, joy, sexual attraction, whatever. Think about 5 negative, and think about how they come into your head each day. And make time to think about the positive ones.
Reminds me of a great Sam Goldstein quote. I can't change your brain, but I can change your mind.
Correct. I believe that's true.
Here, here. I love it. Well, with that, we're going to take another break, this time for a week. And Brainers, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed the show. A lot of great information today. As we go out, enjoy one more little ditty from the band Sigmund Freud. And we'll see you here next time.
And if you listen to their stories,
Just because we said it doesn't mean it's true. You're on your own.